start. Wow.
Okay. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk About It, Brunel.
Welcome.
It is our second episode of the podcast, and today's topic is loneliness.
It's loneliness.
It's
Dealing with loneliness and making friends. Yes,
Yeah.
that is the episode. So why don't we introduce ourselves? So
I'm T.
I'm Jay, and who do we have here from our guests? Who wants to start?
Hi, I'm Mike, and I'm a senior lecturer in social work at Brunel. I'm also the Associate Dean for Equality and Diversity in the College of Health, Medicine and Life Sciences, which is a very long title.
Yeah.
Hi there, my name's Yasser. I graduated from Brunel in 2020, but I actually graduated yesterday.
Congratulations.
Same, wow. I also graduated yesterday. Congrats to us.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm the volunteering manager at the university. Short but sweet.
Short and sweet. Well, thank you all for being here today. So, shall we start?
Yeah, let's start. The first question that I have today is for each of you to define loneliness in your own words.
How'd you
I mean,
define
I feel like everyone has a different way of defining loneliness or different perspective on loneliness. Me, myself, I would say loneliness is not just physically, but it can be mentally too. So what would your perspectives be? Is that a really deep question
very
to
deep
go
question.
in? Sorry.
Wow, haven't you? Wow.
Don't be shy.
I feel we have someone who's done some research about this and maybe they should start.
Well, I mean, thinking about it from different academic perspectives, it's kind of like a psychosocial thing.
Yeah.
It's about how you see yourself, but also how you interact with other people.
Yeah.
And one way of thinking about loneliness is what happens when there's a gap between the kind of social network or emotional relationships you might want with other people, and there's a gap between what you want and what you actually have. So you might feel an absence of some, key people in your life that you can feel close to or can trust. And there are different kinds of loneliness. So there might be emotional loneliness,
Yeah.
where you have people around you, but you don't necessarily feel very close to them. And that sometimes happens, particularly when people go to university for the first time. They're suddenly with lots of other people. They don't know them well enough yet to have
Develop
close relationships.
that connection.
with them. So that's the kind of emotional loneliness. Also the social loneliness, where you don't really have the kind of social network, the number of people in your social network that you would like.
Mm. Do you... Okay, it's going to sound like a very, another deep question, sorry. Do you think that could change depending on culture and society? Like, so you'll have like a societal view and expectations of like what a social life could be, for example, but in another culture that might be different. Does that make sense? So when people come over to, for example, Brunel, when they transition, sorry, I'm going real weird.
Don't worry,
When they transition from abroad, do you think those expectations are different? Like what you might perceive as being lonely, someone might be really comfortable within themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it links to lots of, kind of social things like family structure, like the kind of culture about, whether you have people into your house or whether social life goes on in public spaces.
Yeah.
So often when people come to the UK, I think they find Brits to be a bit standoffish, quite private in some ways. So these cultural expectations, they really do matter.
Yeah, interesting. And would you like to?
Yeah, so you actually illustrated it beautifully with the social loneliness, because I felt that, and the emotional. But if I were to put it in my own words, it kind of feels like you're on your own island, and like it's like a remote island. There's nobody around, nobody's gonna come, and it kind of feels like that.
Yeah. And do you want to go into how you overcame that yourself?
So,
if you want to.
Yeah, that's fine. So it was mainly like looking into myself and who I am really, because there was a point in time where I didn't feel that I had an identity at university, especially when you start off and like you were saying, it's a different environment and everything. It's kind of like an alien world to begin with. And then as I started to get into my final year, end of my final year, my master's year, I actually felt like I could put myself out there and go to events and, connect and network with people, like-minded individuals. Even like within my own course, I wouldn't have dreamed that I would have gone to any kind of like career events and then I found myself going to them and meeting way more people.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's very interesting though, because it's such a diverse and like so populated environment, university.
Well, Brunel, yes.
Yeah, Brunel especially.
Yeah.
And it's ironic in a sense because there's so many people, but you can
Campus
definitely
is
feel so
always
alone.
busy.
Yeah.
It's always busy. It's always hectic. But I guess it's very easy to kind of like fall into that little bubble, whether you want to be in it or not, really.
No, it definitely is. No, it definitely is. And it does tie in a bit with what you said culturally, because some people are more, they're not very at home here sometimes.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
they do tend to isolate themselves a bit because they just don't know what to do. It's so, everything is just so outlandish, so foreign. They do definitely find trouble in making friends and
What was your perspective, can I ask then? Because
my perception. We'll get to you, Ben, as well, don't worry.
No,
You're
no
not-
worries. Yeah.
no, just because he mentioned like culturally, like I know
Culturally.
you moved here as well.
I did move here as well.
So
And
can
here-
you relate to that? Like, did you see like a cultural difference in terms of socializing, or were you just like I'm here and I'm just gonna throw myself into it?
Okay, boring answer, yes. I am, just in general, I'm used to this already. I've lived in a lot of different places, so I'm a bit used to just jumping into it right away, just talking to people, just trying to make new acquaintances. But no, I definitely noticed it, like being away from home for the first time, just not being with my parents anymore, because all the other times I moved, I always had that family support with me, so I wasn't really alone, you know,
Yeah.
even with any possible friendships I had. So it definitely was a shock at the beginning, but it
Yeah.
was exciting. I don't know. For me, it was very exciting. I was very excited to get into it, and so that kind of numbed down the whole being afraid, being lonely, and I won't lie, I did kind of chat with my family every day. So it's not like I was missing them too much in that sense, of course. How about you, Ben? Apologies.
No worries. It's great to hear everybody's thoughts. I suppose to me, loneliness and the concept, it feels a very personal thing. And from my perspective, it's probably about that lack of meaningful connection, and that could be to people, but I think it could also be to place.
Yeah.
We talked about that transition coming over, whether it's the withdrawal from an area where you're comfortable with, or just your lack of ability to sort of engage with a new environment. I think that has a big thing. But interesting to talk about those perceptions. So as someone who has worked with a variety of charities who work to tackle loneliness and social isolation, it's often those who we perceive to be lonely who are in fact not lonely at all. So, and sometimes
Very
that comes
true.
from family members or friends. You think, you recognise that someone lives alone and that they don't socialise all that much. They could be some of the happiest people within themselves because that's their day to day, and then they're happy. And a lot of the services that are out there in the community that go in, and I had this hat for several years where I was going out to meet people who had been referred by a community healthcare service because their occupational therapist, for example, wanted them to engage in a community club or a book club because they knew they were the only person they saw that day. But actually, when you properly spoke to that person and sort of got down to it, they were fine. They're absolutely happy. So I think this idea that just because you are alone doesn't mean you are lonely.
No,
Yeah.
It's very, very individual.
So let me just put this, just to make sure the camera is
Okay.
everything working.
Don't ask me to say that again.
Okay, it's all rolling. It's all great. Cool. So to tie in with what you just said, that not everyone who seems lonely is actually, not everyone who is alone is actually feeling lonely. Do you reckon there's any other misconceptions about the topic as well?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a stigma around it that if you're lonely, you are unhappy. And that I think, from what I understood and learned along the way, that it can fluctuate in terms of your mental and physical state and what you might be doing from day to day. But I think there's this general, you're lonely because you are incapable of socialising, you don't have the social skills, or you have a mental issue, for example, that defines the way that you act and behave. So there's definitely this stigma around anyone coming out saying, I'm lonely, or I'm in need of support. So that's definitely something.
I feel there's a lot of similar on some of activities like going out to eat alone, like going out to the movies alone. It ties in a bit with that as well. Just
it's
because
almost
you
frowned upon.
It is almost
and
frowned
you're
upon.
almost the weirdo in the cinema if you're watching a film.
But it doesn't mean that you feel lonely.
But at the
Just-
same time,
No.
I'm sorry, I've started eating alone because I'm not waiting for someone else to feed up my belly. You have to start doing
That's
things
fair, that's
alone
fair.
because if
No,
you
definitely.
wait on others,
Yeah.
you're missing out.
But how meaningful is your connection with those people that you're going to watch the film with?
That's true.
That's true.
And
you're
are you
sitting in
present at that
silence
moment in
for,
time,
like, 2
or are you
hours.
just there going through the motions? And actually, when you leave that cinema, you might still be lonely. So, I think, it's a hard one to gauge.
That is so true.
So would you two want to add anything to this misconception idea about concept of loneliness as well?
Well, I think the flip side to what you just said about we sometimes assume people are lonely when they're not. We also sometimes assume people aren't lonely when they
Yeah.
might be. So if we think about social media and the whole idea of Facebook me, this idealized picture that people portray of their lives, where they're always laughing with friends or family and having a great time.
Yeah.
Sometimes we might miss loneliness that actually is out there because people project this idealized version of their lives. Yeah.
What they want you to see
Yeah.
and think that's going on.
I think that puts pressure on people that absorb that information as well, because you assume that everybody is having a great time, and that internally makes you feel bad
Yeah.
because that's not you. You're not in those photos, and someone's posted a picture of 3 or 4 friends going out, and I wasn't invited to that, or I don't have those friends to do that. So
Yeah.
you're sort of almost assessing your own loneliness or your own feelings by how someone else is living their life. As you say,
Yeah.
most of us put positive stuff on those platforms, and whether it's them hiding loneliness or someone else perceiving it in that way, I think it's a challenge with social media.
Yeah.
For all its positives.
And you could be out with a load of mates and you put it on Facebook, but actually maybe you don't feel particularly close to any of them.
Yeah.
And you kind of wonder, what am I doing here? And so that emotional connection is important.
It's also meaningless just situation. You're just there, but you're not really there, are you? You're not really enjoying yourself.
just present
You're just
physically.
present, yeah.
And it's quite interesting that because at university it's basically encouraged to you have to go out, and it's kind of
Yeah.
it's like you're forced in a way. And when I was at the beginning of university, it was kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when COVID kind of happened, it was kind of like a reflection. It was actually a bit of a relief for me because I was able to just, I could just see the forest for the trees, and I actually felt a lot better. I feel like lockdown kind of helped me,
Yeah.
which I know is going to be a weird thing to say, in relation to everyone else and everything that's
No, but I
happening.
agree with you.
Yeah, it was kind of like a refresher, like a point of reflection, and I was able to understand, am I really lonely, or have I made myself perceive myself to be lonely?
Mm-hmm.
Because thinking about it now, I don't think I am lonely
Yeah.
after after all that reflection.
It's interesting that you said that because I think before COVID, I was like a social butterfly. I was at every event, anything. I was there. I never said no. And then obviously lockdown happened and you weren't allowed to leave your house. The most I could do was walk my dog. But going into that, I realized that lack of connection with people, I had to really sit with my thoughts and focus on myself and things I wanted to improve on myself. But instead of feeling lonely, I kind of enjoyed that time. So I did a lot of self-care, I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of therapy, But
All those good things.
now I've come to the point where I don't need to constantly be around people or be surrounded by people. I can be by myself and still be okay and happy.
I think definitely everyone learned a bit to live with themselves during the whole lockdown. Because it could have just been you and your thoughts just for a bit.
Maybe that's one upside of the pandemic, that in a way it kind of normalized loneliness,
Yeah.
and lots of people felt loneliness and they were able to express it. So maybe we've done some work to kind of destigmatize it a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one upside.
And a lot of people who do prefer to be alone and all that, they got to feel more at home, I guess, during the whole the whole lockdown. They didn't have to leave.
They're like, this is my norm. This is my normal. Everyone's experienced
definitely.
it. They'll understand.
I think definitely everyone does need a bit of that time, alone,
Mm.
just to be themselves, just to think for themselves a bit. being very social can be definitely very tiring, and
Yeah.
it's very draining. Everyone has their own like social battery, and they can only handle so much. So there is pros to some loneliness sometimes, loneliness to being alone, of course.
I guess we all need solitude now.
Definitely. Definitely. So solitude can be good, of course, but sometimes you do want to be more social. You do want to interact with more people. How would you say would be some good ways to deal with fighting loneliness?
That's a good question. We're talking generally? Or
Generally.
Generally.
We'll move on to Brunel in just a second. Do not worry.
I mean, I think, again, just going back to the fact that it's so personal, I think it's understanding what's important to you. So what are those meaningful connections you're looking to make? What do you need? Rather than, I don't think it's as simple as just going out and forcing yourself to meet people, signing up for events and activities. That's not, that's going to be a potential short-term fix. You need to kind of understand what it is you want to do. And if it's a connection to people, I suppose it's about finding like-minded people. So just to plug volunteering for a second, we have different areas of volunteering. If it's in an area of interest, whether it's a hobby, the opportunity to potentially meet other people that have similar interests to you. I think I would definitely push volunteering, but again, it's individual to the person. As I said, there's some people that aren't necessarily looking for that connection to people, might be to place, but volunteering certainly has been widely published, many benefits to your mental health and building those important connections. So naturally, I'm going to say volunteering.
Listen, I do definitely agree. I've met so many great people through volunteering when I used to do it more. And it's really fun. It's kind of fulfilling because you're helping out, and at the same time you're helping yourself. Because it's really freeing in a sense, and you get to just meet so many new people who are very passionate most times about helping others, and it's just such a nice peace of mind. Anything else as well?
And I believe also joining like social clubs and like things related to your industry, because in the industry you work in, there might be something like a social where people do get-togethers. Like for example, I'm a part of a society like of engineers, and they do these events every season. And ever since joining it, I've met like new people and made friends through it. So that could be one avenue to go through. So
let me just spin this a bit, because I think this is an interesting take that you just mentioned. So that perspective that you mentioned is very much a student-like perspective on how to make new friends and new people. But we have other people here who aren't students anymore, a staff member here at university, and an academic. Would you say it's different making new acquaintances and making friendships in your own positions currently? And if so, how would you go about making new acquaintances, new connections?
I think it is very difficult. I think across the majority of professions, it can be very difficult, and often depending on the size of an organisation and the amount of colleagues you work with. I think, funny enough, we were talking about this earlier, I joined Brunel at a time where the majority of staff are working almost completely from home.
Okay.
So when you come into a new job and your induction is all virtual and online, and all your conversations, introductions are on a monitor, and then you meet that person for the first time and you don't even know it's them. They're 2 foot taller than you thought they were. You don't recognise their face in the different lighting, and I think it can be difficult with so many different teams and departments. It's very hard to work in a collaborative way sometimes. The fact that we have a hybrid working sort of method where meetings are sometimes better face to face but have to be delivered virtually or vice versa, it does make it quite difficult to build those connections. The university are doing things from a wellbeing perspective, which I quite like, and things like the staff garden party we had last week is a nice way of bringing people together. The challenge with those events is, how do you stop people just navigating the 2s and 3s of the people they communicate with all the time? And that's the challenge at any social event, if I'm honest. But I think for a lot of organisations that are closing down offices now and working in a different way, I think working from home brings even more challenges to sort of building those connections, because it's all done through a monitor, and that's not always ideal.
So Michael, would you say anything is different from the academic point of view as well? or do you relate to Ben's perspective?
I definitely agree with what you said about virtual working and that standing in the way of building close relationships, I think. I mean, having worked at home for 18 months or so in the pandemic, it was a real relief to come back to work and actually talk face to face with students and with colleagues, just to kind of re-establish those relationships. So I think that kind of contact is really important. And I think as well, if you look at kind of across the life course, sometimes people make the assumption, well, the friends I've got when I'm 25, they'll always be my friends and I don't need to make new friends. But actually we live much more mobile lives these days. We might tend to move more for work, for other commitments. So I think it's just important just to stay open to the possibility of making new relationships, but real concrete, valuable, deep relationships with people. If I think about the places I've worked, I'm still friends with people that I've worked with maybe 20 years ago, and I've made some really good friends at Brunel as well. And if I leave Brunel, I would want to stay friends with them as well. So I think for me, it's about staying open to these things. Really. And there's lots we can do now to make keeping in touch easier with social media and stuff, and online. But I think there's no substitute for face to face, as I tell my students regularly.
I see that eye contact.
Yes, right. Yeah, and we can see that if you think about, social work by background. If you think about social work, there's no substitute for actually being with somebody, having a conversation.
It's the best way to build a rapport with someone. That's what I believe.
Face to face.
Face to face.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Face to face. But I do still have some clients that prefer remote. They just don't want to see me. It's fine.
A Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, it's just very formal.
Yeah.
You can't, just because of how it is, you can't have casual conversation. You're talking over people, you don't know when to talk.
Yeah.
You're muting, you're unmuting, cameras on, cameras off. You miss, from a professional point of view, you miss those water cooler moments where you're just having a casual chat, and from those chats something develops. It just doesn't happen. It's so awkward having casual chat. It's that 3 or 4 minutes before a meeting's about to start and you're all just sat in a virtual room and nobody wants to say anything because you don't know how to engage, you don't want to talk over people. It's quite a challenge.
I guess the moment for that end, the virtual ones, is right before the meeting starts when everyone's joining. Just, hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
how's your
challenge
day?
Those few minutes, they can be a bit awkward.
And then the host comes in, you have to be like.
That is so true.
But yeah, honestly, because when I started my job the first year, it was work from home, and it felt like I didn't really connect with anyone, even with my manager. But as soon as everybody got back in the office, within like 2 months, I was meeting way more people and actually, like you were saying, building a rapport.
So what I'm hearing is face to face is better, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I've been told during
That's
my
what you've been
masters so
told.
far.
No, definitely though. I feel like even here at university, just even education as well, virtually, it does have its pros and its cons. One thing that I found was quite just strange for me is if you're in there in person, you could just talk to your lecturers, your professors, just ask them a question, be less formal, and just build a rapport as well with your academics. And you miss that a lot if you take it into the virtual space. If you even allocate a question, you have to write a very formal email, and it takes a lot of the.
Or even just waiting for everyone to leave the team's meeting.
Exactly.
And then suddenly your lecturer goes, not you, Mike, because Michael always said, does anyone have any questions? Stay behind. But in general, it's not as easy.
It's so different, isn't it?
It's very different.
But I think even in this new environment, now we're back face to face more, we have to be really careful, and at Brunel and other universities too, about the cost of living crisis is going on, and think about how actually money, finances, that excludes quite a lot of people from social activities like going for a meal or going to the cinema. It's really fundamental for people to socialise, the idea that social activities cost money. So we need to think about how at Brunel we can provide opportunities for people to socialise. It doesn't cost a lot of money.
For free.
For free.
For free.
Yes, absolutely.
So that actually touches on a topic I didn't want to mention. So, Michael, you developed a bit of, or did develop a bit of research on loneliness. Here at Brunel, we have quite the population of mature students. would you say it's harder for them to?
No, I wouldn't. No. You know what's interesting about the research? The research shows that there are two peaks in loneliness across the lifespan. One is the one we might expect in old age, later life, because of things like retiring, bereavement, all these different things. But the other spike is kind of early 20s, which is not surprising if you think about it, because it's a time of dislocation for people. They might have to move home to get a job. They'll be out of their kind of familiar social environment. So, for university students and people moving into their first jobs, the experience of loneliness is quite common. So if we have young people who feel that way, we should be giving them the message that actually it's normal. They're not exceptional in any way for feeling that, and that there's things you can do about it. So mature students, I think, although they might be seen as a bit less cool if they go into the bar or whatever it's called these days. Locos, right? I think there's more of an issue for students in their kind of late teens, early 20s. But of course, loneliness can happen to anybody at any point in their lives. So it's something that we need to normalise and acknowledge that it's something that's just part of life.
I have a question.
Go on.
Does gender or sex play into that?
Everything.
Because, okay, let me just read this properly. I mentioned this to you in our meeting. Different age groups show that different sexes experience loneliness greater than the other.
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
Why does someone's sex matter into that?
So some examples. Yeah. New mums often experience loneliness.
Yeah.
Because they might not, if they're focused on caring for a baby, it means they can't go out and socialise so much, and the people they do socialise with are likely to be other young mums, and they might not want to be in that kind of mum's net kind
young
of
young mummies.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So there's that side to it. I mean, if you think back to the kind of mid 20th century classic nuclear family, there were lots of studies that showed that housewives were lonely at home all day, waiting for husband to come back, looking after the kids, whatever. So there's definitely a gender thing to it, but there's also, we need to think about other aspects of identity as well. So if you're the only LGBT person in a social group, you might experience loneliness. If I think back to when I was at school, I wasn't out to many people because it was very different then. And although I had lots of friends and lots of people around me, it was quite a lonely time sometimes because I couldn't really be myself. So, somewhere like Brunel, we've got a really diverse population, but we need to make sure that people can really be themselves. So student societies are great, what we do around diversity, the initiatives that we're doing at Brunel, but it's even things like being able to speak your own language, eat the kind of food that you enjoy, being with people who understand you and get you without having to either constantly explain yourself to them all the time or just assume that they don't really get you kind of thing. So it's not just sex and gender, it's like sexuality, religion, ethnicity, age, disability, all these different things have an impact.
Definitely.
Sorry.
No, it's a really good answer.
It is.
That's a really good answer.
Okay, welcome to part 2 because we had technical difficulties. But to wrap it up today, I would like to invite you all to share your closing thoughts with us. So,
and whatever you find most important about loneliness and making friendships.
Would you like to go first?
So I think I started first last time.
Yeah.
So I'll go again. So I think mine was just ending on a message to any new student who is who's coming to Brunel, who might be a bit anxious about sort of transitioning into university life, meeting new people, maybe anxious about feeling that they might be lonely, or potentially now. And that is just to say that Brunel has a fantastic network of support services that are here to help new students transition into university. There are so many extracurricular activities that you can get involved in, and the good news, a lot of these present themselves in the first few weeks of being at Brunel, so you are afforded the opportunity to kind of ease your way in. we have great services, and as I'm the volunteering manager, I'll quickly plug volunteering. Volunteering in general is a fantastic way to meet like-minded people, to feel more connected to our campus, to our university, to your fellow students, and to your local community. A whole heap of sort of positive benefits for volunteering in terms of both your mental and physical health, self-esteem and confidence, and the Brunel volunteers, our team, are definitely here to support any new student, find the right opportunity for them, and very quickly, I suppose, touching on the Brunel Buddies scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a scheme at Brunel where existing students will offer peer support to any new student, and a bit of a signposting service. So if you have questions about where things are on campus, maybe some questions about your course, how to join a sports team, a society, then we're able to offer a friendly face in the form of a student volunteer, a Brunel buddy, who can help guide you with some of those answers, perhaps give you a tour of the campus, help with little questions like how to check out a library book, little things like that just help you with your confidence and sort of understand how Brunel works. And you can register to have a Brunel buddy on the Brunel Volunteers website, Brunel Volunteers at brunel.ac.uk. You can follow Brunel Volunteers on Instagram. It's just Brunel Volunteers. We have a link in our bio. And you just need to provide a bit of information about why you'd like a buddy, and we'll hopefully be able to provide you one.
Thank you.
Who wants to go next?
Okay. So, to new students and existing students, to not be too hard on yourself, to not pressure yourself. At the end of the day, there's so many students here that are going through similar to what you're going through, and it's good to reach out and also to help tackle loneliness, to join events and hobbies that you're passionate about, and also ensuring that you yourself are comfortable in terms of what other groups or areas that you want to go into, and also stuff related to your course if there's any sort of like networking events going on.
Thank you.
That was a really good answer. Finally. I mean, you could still add yours in a bit as well, your closing thoughts.
I think my advice to new students would be to give it time, because it's difficult to make these deep connections with people immediately. You have to kind of work people out and let them work you out as well. So I think put yourself out there, but make sure that you don't do anything you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
Be true to yourself. Be open to other people, and just give it a chance to work. And if you get to the point where you feel lonely and it's affecting your quality of life, there are always people to talk to on campus. It could be somebody on your program. It could be a member of the academic staff, your tutor. It could be somebody from the student centre. Any of the support services that are available at Brunel.
There's so many options.
There are, yeah. No need to suffer in silence by yourself. Reach out to somebody.
And would you like my thoughts?
I do want to hear your thoughts as well.
My closing thoughts on loneliness. I think it's important to be true to yourself, to be aware of your own emotions, be open-minded to others, like Mike said, but also be selective with what you want to do, what you like and what you dislike. And as I said previously when we weren't recording, the best is yet to come.
We tried.
Thank you guys for taking part. Thank you guys for listening. We will attach the links below to our Spotify, our Instagram. You can DM us if you would like to take part. You can also send us an email if you would like to take part. I will also attach the links to the Brunel Buddies system. And yeah, thanks for listening. Stay tuned until I believe September.
Yeah, September.
Okay.